Luke Macias, director of the Defend Texas Liberty PAC. Is that, hold on. Yeah, Defend Texas Liberty. All right, let me try. Supposedly I'm the pro. All right, let me try this again. All right,
Go.
Here we go. Luke Macias, director of the Defend Texas Liberty PAC. Thank you so much for joining us. So as part of your group, you were also conducting a recent poll. Tell me about why it was important for you to do this poll, what the purpose is, and then what your findings were.
Yeah, so we're conducting a series of polls throughout the general election of Republican primary voters, of just general election voters as a whole. But we went in with something specific that we haven't really seen replicated, which is an analysis of the newly registered voters in Texas. Texas has registered over 1.1 million voters. The number isn't exact. It actually could be quite higher than that. But ultimately, we've registered more voters since November of 2020 than the 8 smallest states in the entire nation. So we've imported a massive amount of new individuals, fellow citizens, our neighbors who have opinions. And so we wanted to go in and specifically analyze who are these people. 40% of the newly registered voters have moved to Texas in the last 2 years. So the people who are registering, some of them have been here for a little while, but not participated in the political process. And many of them are newly coming. I mean, I have some of them in my church, and I'm sure other people do too. What we ultimately found out was that there is a 20-point advantage for Republicans amongst these new voters. So we don't know how many of them are going to participate in the November election. But if they do come out, to whatever extent they do, it should benefit Republicans. There's about a 20% advantage. 44% of these newly registered voters identify as Republicans, 24% identify as Democrats, and 32% say they're independent. Texas is different than other states. In Florida, when you register, you identify yourself as a party, either a Republican or a Democrat. We don't have partisan registration. So this is our only shot to get really a perspective of what do these people believe. When you start asking about different issues, whether it's banning sex change surgeries on kids, giving illegals taxpayer subsidies, the death penalty, so on and so forth, these people line up as Republicans even more so. They have more conservative views. 62% think we should ban puberty blockers for children versus 25% supporting. So when you start asking them even about specific issues with immigration, with criminal justice, with some of the social cultural issues that are facing our state on property tax relief, they line up even more Republican. So this tells us that the more these people participate in the process, the better Republicans will do in November.
And let me ask you, as far as, just the breakdown of the partisan affiliation, where you have more independents than Democrats, when you set out to do the poll, did you try to get a certain amount of each, in the sense, or is there really not any way you can control that?
It's a great question. Really, what we can control is making sure that this is an accurate sample of those who have recently registered. So if a certain percentage of the newly registered voters are under the age of 35 or over the age of 70, then we need to make sure that our poll is balanced in accordance with the actual breakdown. We don't know what percentage of people registered are Democrats or Republicans. And so those bear themselves out in the numbers. But ultimately what we do is we go in and we make sure that the data we're collecting is from an accurate sample demographically of those who have recently registered, and this poll is.
Let me ask you about the issues that are most important to these newly registered voters. You have a whole bunch of issues listed there. One thing that's not is inflation in the economy. Why did you decide against having that as a choice?
That's a great question. So basically what we wanted to understand is where these people fell on cultural lines. So we had abortion, we had immigration, we have issues on this that really reflect the more cultural divides that we have as a nation, gun rights, things like that. So we really wanted to know on the cultural issues where these people put themselves into different buckets. And what we found was that Republicans still hold an advantage overall. The largest, let's say the largest subset that has interest in one category is abortion. But when you dig into that, it's largely Democrats. And of course, yes, there are some independents that still care about it. However, a lot of Republicans are still care about property taxes. They care about border security. and they care about things that matter more to a Republican, or let's say a right of center individual in Texas.
One of the interesting things on that is while you do have more Republicans and independents than Democrats, abortion came out to be the number one issue, the largest concern among everybody in the poll. And that's because I would imagine 60% of the Democrats said that this was their number one issue. So what does this tell you? And does it cause any concern, or should it cause any concern for Republicans?
Abortion is definitely the issue that's giving Democrats the energy on their side. They're more unified behind one singular issue. Republicans, if you look at them, they're equally divided between issues like gun rights, border security, and things like that that are really affecting them and they care most deeply about. Democrats have really honed in on abortion as their number one cultural driver. It is what's driving their energy. It is going to help them drive voters to the polls in November. Really, what we take away from it is that ultimately a majority of independents in this poll can be gotten if you talk about the cultural issues. We believe if there is a conversation about the cultural issues facing Texas, Republicans are going to win the independent voters, because when it comes to the sexualization of children, the transitionary therapy that minors are receiving, criminal justice issues, the issues of the invasion going on at the border, they're going to side with the Republican Party. So we believe that Republicans shouldn't shy away from the cultural issues, but be willing to address them, knowing that, yes, abortion is an issue that they're going to disagree with some independents on, and pretty much every Democrat.
I was just going to ask you about that because independents, it was the number one issue as well, 24%. I guess the question then becomes, for these independents, I would imagine, is do they look at it through the abortion as being the number one issue to them, or do they look at the other issues that you have here, whether it's border security, election integrity, gun rights, property taxes, and education, and say, okay, those as a group are more important than this one as abortion? Is that right?
I think what we have to realize is that if you are an independent voter and abortion is your number one issue, you're probably not voting Republican in November. And sometimes what some Republicans tend to do is they try to chase that one individual and try to see what it is they can do to get their vote. We would argue that if you look at independents as a whole, 60% of them are gettable by Republicans. They're with us on the sexualization of children. They're with us on our positions on education. They're with us on our positions of the border. Republicans historically have not won the independent vote in our state. We do well with independent voters, but we don't need to win them because there are more Republicans than Democrats. In this poll in particular, we're just looking at the new registered voters. What we would say is it is very easy to split the independents in this poll, if not overperform with independents. And if we even win them slightly, then it means that of the new registered voters voting, Republicans are going to walk away with a more than 20% margin, which could really help us in some of these swing districts.
And so as far as, the Republicans, so you're saying they really shouldn't be too worried about the fact that abortion has really galvanized Democrats?
Abortion has definitely given Democrats the energy. Republicans need to not obsess over that and realize that when it comes to the laundry list of cultural issues facing our state, we are on the side of the vast majority of people on almost every single issue. And we need to make Democrats defend their very radical positions on those issues instead of obsessing over just how much abortion is energizing the Democrat base.
Can I have you say that again, just because there was a little
Yeah.
hiccup there in the
Yep.
audio?
Yep.
So let me ask the question again. So your advice to Republicans is they shouldn't be too concerned about the fact that abortion has galvanized Democrats?
Yeah, we believe that at the end of the day, if we take a look at the overall view of these newly registered voters and most Texans on the laundry list of cultural issues facing our state, whether it be the education, sexualization of our children, the invasion at the border, all the immigration struggles that Texas has right now, we need to understand that they are with the Republican Party. And we should put Democrats on defense regarding their radical views in those particular arenas. That would be better for Republicans to do than to obsess over the fact that abortion as an issue is really motivating the Democrat base. We understand that it's done that, and we're not going to change that. But what we can change is what we talk about from now till November. And the more we focus on all of these different issues, the more we are going to define Democrats as just as radical as they are, and the more out of touch they will be to the average Texan.
And, the fact that when you look at what motivates the Republicans as far as the issues, border security, is number one, followed by elections integrity, and then gun rights. I'm wondering, because they are split over what their number one concern is, does that dissipate some of the motivation or no?
So currently, we're not seeing any decrease in Republican motivation to vote in the fall. And this is just when it comes to nationwide polling that we're seeing all across the nation. Republican energy has not dissipated. We have seen Democrat energy increase. So they're really more in line with each other. The reason we find polls like this interesting is that because Republicans and Democrats are both coming into November with a decent amount of energy, granted, they care about different issues, but they're all very energized to vote, whether it's election integrity, gun rights, property rights, education, the sexualization of children, or abortion, they're motivated. So this is going to come down to, one, where do the independents fall, right? And then two, the newly registered voters that show up, which is what this poll said. Those people are, for the most part, not as big a participant in most of the public polling we see. And so this new group of voters that shows up, we believe are going to benefit Republicans even more, which is probably not going to be seen in most polling that you see from now until November.
Two other questions, Luke, and I appreciate your time. So just going back to the people who took part in this survey. So if people lived in Texas before, but these are all newly registered voters. So it was either if you voted in the 2020 election and you said yes, that means you had to be from another state, right?
Yep.
And then the only other way you could participate is if you did not vote in 2020, but you are from Texas.
Yeah, so ultimately there's a set of eliminators that pollsters create to try to maintain as pure a sample as possible. Ultimately, we conducted this poll. When you register to vote, if you're an individual Texan out there and you registered 10 years ago, and I looked you up, and I registered when I was 18 years old, so 14 years ago. And if you look at my voter registration, you can see that I registered when when I was 18 years old. And so the same thing can be said for each and every one of the Texans. So we can go in and specifically say these 1.1 million Texans all registered to vote after the November 2020 elections. When you actually are polling somebody, and this is true within any poll, there's a set of eliminations you put in to make sure that you're talking to that individual voter, right? And those same rules were applied to this poll as well to try to keep the sample as accurate as possible.
And then my last question, just on the economy again. The fact that the economy was not a choice here, how much of it do you think, I mean, and this is, I guess, an educated guess really on your part, where do you think the economy, what kind of role do you think the economy will play in this election? Because inflation is a real thing. You see it at the supermarket and elsewhere, obviously. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
We'll definitely be testing that issue from now till November with our general election polling. So we're going to see just how motivated people are based on the economy and the inflation. And honestly, I think voters right now are really combining those issues. When you ask people who are concerned about the economy what their biggest concerns are, it's usually inflation because it's hitting their pocketbook. It's what they're thinking might lead to their unemployment at some point. The reality is that the more focused they are on the economy, the better for Republicans that will be. So we do believe that as those concerns grow, that's only going to benefit the Republican Party, since the Biden administration is largely seen as more responsible than any other politician when it comes to the economic ills that are facing our nation.
Okay, Luke Macias, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Jack. Thank you for having me on.